Zetman begins with a fight between two rival superheroes, Zet and Alpha. They are Jin Kanzaki, a young man with the ability to transform into a superhuman known as Zet, and Koga Amagi, a young man with a strong sense of justice who uses technology to fight as Alpha. The fates of these two men, and those around them, intertwine as they fight to protect mankind and destroy monstrous abominations known as players, who ironically are the creations of the Amagi Corporation, the company founded by Koga's grandfather, Mitsugai Amagi. The scene shows the atmosphere of a battle between two monsters known as players. The fight was witnessed by rich people who made it a place to bet. The players were creatures that were created with the intent to create perfect artificial humans. The project became more than just creating the perfect artificial human. It became a hobby for the rich men to bet on them, gambling as they were pitted against other monsters to fight. That night, the players finally gained awareness and killed off everyone in sight. Because of this, many players feel that humans mistreated them and that they are far superior and deserve better. The scene then switches and shows two scientists arguing about their creation, a baby boy named Zet. One of these scientists, a man named Goro Kanzaki, wanted nothing more for Zet than to grow up as a normal human. So, he took Zet and ran away. Several years later, when the public was so familiar with the hero named Alphas, who was famous through television entertainment shows, the real danger was targeting them. In an incident that happened so fast, a man was killed in a public place. The police have yet to find a clue about the perpetrator's identity. However, they assumed the killings were related to 4 other incidents with some of the same characteristics, and all victims died. Elsewhere, Goro Kanzaki, who is now living poor and homeless, is seen with a 10-year-old boy, who is none other than Zet. He names the boy Jin and has raised him as his grandson. He teaches Jin to always do good and have a high sense of justice. Because of that, Jin always thought that saving people was his job. One day, Jin saw a woman being threatened by a gang of thugs who wanted to rob her. When she was desperate, he offered to help beat the thugs but asked for a reward of 10,000 yen for his services. Without thinking, she then agreed to his requirements. Even though he is a thin boy and his clothes are shabby, he has a pretty great fighting ability, so he can defeat the gang of thugs alone. However, when Jin was about to collect his payment, his friends appeared and immediately asked him to leave. His closest friends are a boy his age, Kuga Amagi, and his younger sister, Kanoha. Unlike Jin, who is poor and homeless, they come from wealthy families. Even so, they didn't mind playing with Jin. Koga has developed a strong sense of justice from the inspiration of the anime hero, Alphas. Because of that, he aspires to become an enforcer of justice who fights crime. He also scolded Jin for asking for something in return for helping others. In fact, a true hero should help others selflessly. But Jin said he was forced to ask for something in return because he needed money. Jin, who realized Konoha was embarrassed by her bandaged wrist, told her that his hand was also bandaged. Jin then removed the bandage and showed a ring embedded in his hand. He said that his grandfather asked him to always keep the ring's existence a secret from anyone, but he showed it to Koga and Konoha because they were his friends. When he was about to return to his residence, Jin again met the woman he was helping, giving him 10,000 yen and a business card. Her name is Akemi Kawakami. She told him that he could contact her anytime if he needed help. Then he thanked her and rushed to meet his grandfather. Arriving there, Jin was shocked when he saw that his neighbors had been killed. He rushed to meet his grandfather, who seemed to be dying in a pool of his own blood due to an attack incident that had occurred moments before. He panicked and then tried to ask a doctor who lived nearby for help, but he was simply rejected because he had no money. Jin then tried to contact Koga, but Koga's cell phone was seized and destroyed by his father, who forbade him to be friends with a poor boy like Jin. Amid his despair, Jin remembered the business card given to him and contacted Akemi. Seeing his grandfather, who was seriously injured, Akemi rushed to take him to the hospital to get medical help immediately. However, in the end, his grandfather died. Goro and the people who live there are suspected of being victims of a serial murder that has recently been happening. The police then conducted autopsies on their bodies. Meanwhile, Akemi invites Jin to stay at her house until social services find the right foster home for him. She, who has a son the same age as him, feels sorry for him, who has lost his family. In another place, Mitsugai Amagi, the founder of the Amagi Corporation, who is Koga's grandfather, is seen observing one of his experiments when his men arrive and inform them that they have found Goro Kanzaki. Mitsugai and Goro used to be fellow scientists who carried out an experiment to create the perfect artificial humans. However, the experiment ended in disaster and turned the experimental subjects into vicious monsters nicknamed the Players. Mitsugai then asks about Zet's whereabouts. This experimental subject was taken away by Goro several years ago, and he knew about a boy named Jin, who he considered as his grandson. One night, when Akemi and Jin were on their way home from shopping, they were confronted by a man who attacked her until she was seriously injured. The man was none other than the player in disguise and the mastermind behind the recent series of murders. Jin, who can no longer contain his anger when the man injured her, awakens his hidden power as Zet and can easily defeat the player. However, Jin immediately lost consciousness after using his power. Not long after, a man named Seiji Haitani arrives and seems interested in him. Seiji is one of the evolved creatures similar to the players but a higher ranked class. They follow the rules of their organization and avoid needless killing. As an organization, their control can reach as far as the Prime Minister of Japan. Besides him, a creature named the Sweeper also appears there to eliminate the defective players who have violated the rules and caused chaos. The next day, Jin wakes up in the hospital, relieved to know that Akemi's life has been saved. Several years later, Koga, now an adult, watches news broadcasts on television about fire incidents that have recently occurred frequently and have claimed many lives. The fire incident was caused by a player who chose to break Evol's rules so he could do whatever he wanted, including killing humans. Koga, who still aspires to become an enforcer of justice, is determined to uncover the mastermind behind the fire incident, even though he doesn't have superpowers. Elsewhere, Konoha, who has now become a high school girl, is seen distributing food to the poor and homeless with her mother. And suddenly, she finally reunited with Jin, who had disappeared after the death of his grandfather. She recognized him from the ring embedded inside his wrist. He still recognizes and praises her because she always helps the poor. Konoha then met her older brother, Koga, and told him about Jin. Knowing that Jin is still alive and in good condition, he also looks relieved and hopes to meet Jin. Elsewhere, Jin is battling the player who causes a fire incident in an apartment building. Koga and his team, including Konoha, arrive there to catch the mastermind behind the fire incident. When Koga went inside, he instead met Jin, who was about to save a mother and her 2 children who were still trapped in the room. As the fire spread throughout the building, Koga prioritized the victim's rescue mission. Meanwhile, Jin is back fighting the player, who attacks him repeatedly while raving about his hatred for humanity. Jin awakens the Zet power in him, which surprises the player and calls him the Charisma. After transforming into Zet, he can easily defeat the player and extinguish the fire by tearing down the building. However, just like before, after using the power of Zet, he collapsed unconscious because his body was exhausted. Mitsugai, who had been keeping an eye on Jin because he was Zet, took him to a secret facility belonging to the Amagi Corporation. To revive the power of Zet in his body, Mitsugai uses Akemi as bait. Seeing her, who was weak and helpless and became a prisoner of the player, Jin immediately became angry and finally awakened the power of Zet. The player who became Jin's opponent this time turned out to be a Zet clone still the subject of experiments by scientists. Zet's red clone then attacked him repeatedly and felt proud when he fell down and did not respond to his attacks. However, in the end, Jin overthrew Zet's red clone with just one light blow. Although he had not awakened Zet's power to a perfect level, his current strength had exceeded Mitsugai's expectations. However, the cells in Jin's body began to deteriorate, so Mitsugai then asked Goro for help to overcome the problem. Some time ago, Mitsugai ordered his men to bring Goro's corpse to the Amagi Corporation's facility. Afterward, his head was hooked to a computer to obtain unknown information about Zet or Jin. He told them they had to kill the player still near Jin. Mitsugai also wonders who the player is because Zet's clone has died. One of the scientists, a man named Kishimoto, tells him that the woman who looks like Akemi is actually a player. Because of that, they had to kill her so that Jin could return to his human form. One of Mitsugai's men then stepped forward and shot the woman. In the end, Jin managed to suppress Zet's power, returned to his human form, and then collapsed unconscious. After Jin finally woke up, he immediately felt angry at what Mitsugai had done to his foster mother. However, Mitsugai ignores this, taking him to an underground facility called the Forgotten Zone, which used to be where the players lived. There, Mitsugai shows the Ring of Exposures, which relates to Angel's ring in Jin's body. Mitsugai then explains the origins of the players, who were once humans. Through a phenomenon called regression, the Ring of Exposures could turn them into violent, bloodthirsty monsters, who came to be known as the players. He does not deny that he is the one who created the players and made the battles between the monsters a betting arena to raise funds to perfect his experiments. However, things get out of control, so Mitsugai enlists Goro's help to create the Hunter, who will be tasked with exterminating the monsters, which is none other than Zet. Mitsugai also reveals to Jin that Goro is actually Jin's father, and he actually refuses to make Jin a Zet. Because of that, Goro is desperate to take him away from the facility and raise him as an ordinary human so that he can live a normal life. However, Jin could not escape his fate, so Mitsugai asked him to help fight the monsters. After that, Mitsugai invites Jin out and shows that Akemi is alive and well, but Mitsugai forbids him to meet Akemi because her safety will be threatened if he is near her. He became very sad and frustrated because he could no longer live with his beloved foster mother. Even so, Jin will do whatever it takes, including becoming a Zet and achieving his perfect form, to protect Akemi and everyone else from the players who want to destroy humanity. However, he puts some conditions on Mitsugai. One of them is to make the scar on Akemi's face go and try something so that she can live with her son, who has been living with her ex-husband. 2 years later, the police found several bodies that had melted like sand. A senior policeman named Sayama suspects that the corpse is a victim of the sand monster. His younger comrades made it a joke because he didn't believe in monsters. When he returned to the police station, Sayama found Jin, who was in prison because he had been involved in a fight. Sayama then released Jin because it turned out that he was fighting to defend a man who was being bullied by a gang of thugs. He has known Jin since investigating the case of Goro Kanzaki's death and tries to advise him to live a better life and not get into fights. Jin appreciated Sayama's attention because it made him happy. Moreover, he always remembers Sayama's words when he was a child. The scene then switches and shows 3 men threatening their victims, where one of them, named Shu, turns the victim into melting like sand. On the other hand, a girl who happened to be passing by accidentally saw the incident, so she rushed to run away from the 3 of them who had ambitions to kill her. Elsewhere, Kishimoto gave special chewing gum that could stimulate the Zet cells in Jin's body so that he could turn into Zet without having to go through a process that involves the emotional side. In addition, Jin is given special clothes that can blend into his body when he turns into Zet, so he no longer has to worry about his clothes being torn. When Jin was about to return to his residence, he accidentally met Konoha, who was doing volunteer work with her mother. Knowing that now he couldn't jeopardize her safety by being near him, he violently chased her away and hurried away from her. Even though he can't do many things that require him to be close to ordinary humans, Jin still helps people by beating up thugs who often annoy residents and giving food to the homeless. Arriving home, Jin met the girl being chased by Shu and his brothers. Jin told her to leave the house, but she refused and told him what she had just seen. She then begged him to be allowed to hide there for a while. While they were having dinner, Jin felt the presence of the players nearby. He rushed out and asked her to stay in the house if she wanted to survive. However, she had been quietly tailing him instead. On the other hand, his movements were monitored by Mitsugai's men through CCTV cameras. They saw the girl who had been following Jin, lost track of him in an uninhabited area, and instead found her bag left behind when she ran away from the 3 men. It turned out that all those were traps that had been set up by Shu and his brothers. When Shu was about to kill the girl, Jin arrived there and immediately attacked her. A fierce battle between them was inevitable. Mitsugai's men, who watched Jin, then shot the girl with stun bullets, making her unconscious to cover Jin's identity as Zet. Shu, who realized that Jin was a formidable opponent, changed to his true form, a player. Seeing this, his brothers ran away from the fight because the sweeper would come to the players who violated the rules by changing their form at will. Jin, who had expected this, then bit his gum, turning into Zet, although his appearance was completely different from before. With the power of Zet, Jin can easily defeat the monster. However, he has not been able to return to his human form because apparently, the monster's core managed to escape. At the same time, the sweeper arrived there and immediately eliminated the monster's core so that Jin finally returned to his human form. However, the sweeper saw Jin as Zet, so the sweeper intended to eliminate him. But then, Seiji appears and stops the sweeper, saying that their boss won't be happy if the sweeper kills Jin. Hearing this, the sweeper then left from there. Jin then asked Seiji about himself and the sweeper. Seiji only told him that he was part of Eval and had been watching him for a long time. He also told Jin that he couldn't wait for Jin to grow up and complete his Zet form. When Jin wanted to ask further, he disappeared because Mitsugai and his men had already arrived. Mitsugai then explains to him about the sweeper and asks him to be careful. The next day, the girl finally woke up and introduced herself as Tanaka. Jin finally finds out that he has been being watched by Mitsugai all this time, so he orders Tanaka to get out of his house as soon as possible. Elsewhere, Koga is taken to a secret facility belonging to the Amagi Corporation, which his father doesn't even know about. Inside the secret facility, Koga's team, which once helped him, turns out to have developed various weapons and equipment so that he can fulfill his dream of becoming an enforcer of justice like the superhero who became his idol. However, because it was not as expected, Koga then asked his team to make a few improvements to the superhero costume he would wear because he was determined to be like alphas. He also thanked his team for being considerate of him and trying to fulfill his dream. After that, he meets an old man named Jiro, who claims to be a fan of him. 2 years ago, Koga became very popular and was considered a hero because he had managed to save victims trapped in burning buildings. Although he had previously refused to reveal his identity, his father forced him because positive publicity could bring profits to the company. Because of that, he became famous everywhere and had many fans. Jiro then took out his cell phone and showed Konoha, who was thrown into the swimming pool, and she couldn't swim. To test whether Koga really has a high sense of justice, Jiro then gives him a choice: save his sister or 3 strangers who are big fans of him. Koga chose to save his sister and rushed toward the swimming pool. But when he got there, he saw Konoha, who was learning to swim and seemed fine. Elsewhere, because he chose to save his sister, 3 students who are big fans of him finally have to die. Jiro turns out to be part of Eval, who wants to take revenge on the Amagi family for the heinous deeds that the Amagi family did to him and the players. However, Eval's boss warns Jiro not to harm humans, even when Mitsugai Amagi has caused them misery. The next day, Koga sees a television program that reports the murder of the 3 schoolgirls. Jiro then calls him and tells him he has failed the exam because being a hero is not as easy as one might think. Meanwhile, Seiji goes to Shu's brothers, Abizo and Gakizo, and asks them to kill Jin. He assures them that he will get in the way of the sweeper. If Jiro acts openly, then Seiji prefers to do everything secretly so as not to attract the attention of their boss and the sweeper. While Jin was traveling with Tanaka, they accidentally bumped into Konoha and her friend. She then approached him and intended to return the necklace belonging to him, who had fallen during a fire incident several years ago. However, he rudely told her not to approach him and hurried away. Not long after, Jin sensed the presence of the players nearby and found that Konoha and her friend had been kidnapped by them. Abizo then appeared in front of him and showed his true form as a player, while Gakizo was in charge of overseeing Konoha and her friend. Jin just realized that his gum was left behind, so he couldn't transform into Zet, and he was overwhelmed by Abizo. Elsewhere, Koga, who finally got the Alpha's hero costume and equipment as he wanted, gets a call from Konoha asking for his help. Koga then donned the Alpha's hero costume and rushed to save his sister. Meanwhile, Jin, who was getting desperate, sensed that Konoha was in danger, so he decided to save her first. Jin arrived there in time and managed to save Konoha. However, Gakizo, who had changed to his original form, namely the cockroach monster, immediately confronted Jin with a herd of smaller cockroach monsters. When Jin was pushed down by an attack from Gakizo, Koga arrived and helped him by killing Gakizo and a herd of other monsters. He then told Koga to prioritize Konoha's safety and her friend because she lost a lot of blood. Koga nodded in understanding and rushed to fly Konoha and her friend with the drone that his team had prepared. On the other hand, some homeless people around the area saw Jin's appearance and decided to help him, but he refused and asked them to leave because the vagabonds wouldn't be able to deal with the bloodthirsty swarms of monsters. Jin, who was seriously injured from trying to fight the players without using the power of Zet, was then intercepted by Seiji, who implants a ceramic spike into his heart to allow him to freely become Zet. Sure enough, not long after, Jin finally turned into Zet. Even now, he can reach the perfect level, turning into Red Zet. Mitsugai and his men, who had been monitoring him through surveillance cameras for a while, wondered what had happened because Jin suddenly turned into Zet and reached the perfect level. On the other hand, Jin felt the tremendous power that had just been awakened within his body, so he was eager to defeat the monsters. When he fought against the player and could easily overtake him, Seiji appeared and told him that he purposely ordered Abizo and his brothers to kill him or harm those closest to him. Seiji wanted to see if Jin could reach the red level Zet, which was the perfect level. An annoyed Jin attacks him because Seiji has used other people to achieve his goals. However, he could easily dodge Jin's attack and left because it wasn't time for him to fight against Jin yet. Elsewhere, Koga is fighting to the death against Abizo. Relying solely on the Amagi Corporation's advanced equipment and meager physical abilities, he seems overwhelmed by Abizo, who is a tough player. When he was in a state of urgency, Jin arrived and immediately helped him deal with Abizo and the shrimp monsters who were his minions. Knowing that this was the first time Koga faced a swarm of monsters, Jin told him to persevere and become stronger. When Jin in Zet's form mentions his name, he wonders why Zet knows his name. As the fight grew fiercer, Abizo then increased his strength and managed to push Jin until he was forced to return to his usual Zet mode. However, in the end, Jin defeated Abizo and returned to his human form. Koga, who saw this, seemed so surprised because he didn't expect that the monster-like figure who helped him was his best friend, Jin. On the other hand, Mitsugai, who witnessed the fight, also seemed surprised that the figure of the Alpha's hero who suddenly appeared there was his grandson, Koga. Knowing that the Amagi Corporation and his grandfather were involved, Koga rushed to Mitsugai and demanded an explanation for what had happened so far. Mitsugai was forced to reveal everything to him. Jin, who returned home, was shocked to find out that Tanaka had also been attacked by a herd of cockroaches who were Gakizo's henchmen. However, she managed to survive after Gakizo was defeated, and she seemed so relieved to be able to meet Jin again. A few days later, Jin and Koga came to the hospital because Konoha asked them to come. Koga then told Jin that his grandfather had told him everything, so he knew about Jin becoming Zet. A massive fan of the animated film Alphas on television since he was a child told Jin that the red Zet figure was designed based on one of the characters created by the animation studio owned by the Amagi Corporation. The character is the strongest hero character who can defeat demons. Koga turned out to really admire Jin and also Zet in his body. However, Jin doesn't seem to think Zet is that great. After all, he ultimately has to suffer because he can't live a normal human life. Even so, Koga seems very excited about it and tells Jin that he will become alphas and help him defeat the players. Koga even called him a hero named Zetman. When they finally met, Konoha asked them to tell her what really happened and why the monsters attacked him. Not wanting to make Konoha feel anxious and afraid, Jin kept everything secret by saying they didn't know what was happening. On the other hand, Koga seems to disagree with his decision because his sister should know what their grandfather has done because Mitsugai has indirectly endangered Konoha's safety. For one reason, Jin decided to let Tanaka live with him, even letting people think that she is his girlfriend. However, Mitsugai, who had warned Jin to stay away from humans for their safety, did not just stay silent and asked him to end his relationship with her as soon as possible. After that, Mitsugai sent Jin to the lab because he wanted to do research on Jin's body until he could reach the perfect Zet level. Mitsugai wants to find out the cause of the drastic change in his body and hopes to find an answer. Koga was with them this time because he was curious about what really happened to Jin. While Kishimoto was scanning Jin's body to measure his Zet cells, Mitsugai told Koga that the Amagi Corporation was conducting an experiment to create a non-human species called Net. However, due to a slight error in the process, Zet was created as a Net side effect. Unexpectedly, Zet turned out to have reached the perfect stage of the experiment, so Mitsugai and Goro called the experimental result Zet. Mitsugai intends to become Zet as the best weapon to crush the players. However, Goro turns out to want to raise Zet as an ordinary human and live a normal life like humans in general. Even so, Jin tells Koga that he has chosen to live as a Zet because he can protect everyone from monsters' attacks and bring about world peace. After observing the series of examinations on Jin's body, Mitsugai concluded that Seiji had forcibly activated the ring of exposures within Jin's body so that he could attain perfection, even temporarily. Mitsugai had no idea that Seiji actually knew more about Zet than he was. Shortly afterward, Jin, for some reason, sensed Goro's presence there and forced Mitsugai to take him to where his grandfather was. Mitsugai also has no choice but to take Jin to where Goro is. However, how surprised Jin was when he found out that all that was left of his grandfather was his head. Mitsugai reveals that they can only save Goro's brain and keep him alive to help them understand Zet. Mitsugai then asks Jin to ask Goro about what they should do so that he can reach the perfect level and maintain it stably because he needs that power to protect everyone from the monster's attacks. However, Jin unplugged one of the wires connected to Goro's head, causing him to die completely. He did that on purpose because he didn't want to make Goro suffer, so he could rest in peace. Jin looks so sad and devastated when he hears Goro's last message to him, asking him if he eats regularly. Not only that, but Goro also asked about his red stone, which turned out to be in Konoha. Koga then called his mother to ask about Konoha's whereabouts and Jin's necklace with a red stone pendant. Unbeknownst to anyone, it turns out that Jiro has been spying on the Amagi family with insect-sized monsters that can function as eavesdroppers and control anyone in their path. Not long after, several men were seen infiltrating Koga's mother's residence. They were apparently ordered by Seiji to get the necklace and kidnap Konoha. One of them then sneaked into her room and disguised himself as Jin to retrieve the necklace from her. However, at the same time, Jin and the others arrived and intended to take the necklace, resulting in a fight between them. The intruders later revealed that they were created from a sample of Jin's blood. Because of that, they can change shape to resemble Jin and have a little Zet power. The intruders were not only targeting Konoha but also intended to kill Mitsugai, who was also there. However, their action was thwarted by Kishimoto, willing to sacrifice himself to protect Mitsugai. Jin finally managed to beat them all after he turned into Zet. Koga rushed to Konoha's room and found the girl in good condition, although an intruder had managed to escape and stole Jin's necklace and gave it to Jiro. When they thought the attack was over, Jiro, who was also involved in the attack along with Seiji, then detonated the bomb that the intruders had planted in the house. Mitsugai, injured in the attack, was rushed to the hospital for intensive treatment. He looked sad and devastated because Kishimoto was willing to sacrifice his life for him. He then wonders who their enemy is, who turns out to have enough funds to create clones and make sophisticated equipment. Koga, who heard this, then determined to take revenge because they had dared to threaten Konoha and destroy his house. When Jin was about to go home, he met the Evol's boss, who called himself the Master. He was about to attack the man, but the sweeper was already behind him, threatening Jin with his sword. Master told Jin that he was the first player to rebel against humans who had exploited him for profit. Master seems to be a pacifist as he apologizes for the incident at the Amagi family's house and says that the mastermind of the incident is none other than Seiji. He said that most players who joined Eval were peace-loving like him. They also don't like conflict and are always trying to find a way to coexist with humans. However, Seiji didn't think so and wanted the destruction of mankind. Master reveals that he is unable to defeat Seiji. Because of that, he asked Jin to help defeat Seiji and his gang, and Jin agreed. At the same time, Koga received news that Konoha had disappeared. Shortly after, Koga received a call from Jiro saying that he knew Konoha's whereabouts. He rushed to tell Jin about Konoha missing and immediately went to meet Jiro in the parking area, where Jiro then asked him to get into his car. Meanwhile, Koga's team, which has installed a tracking device on him, secretly follows Jiro's car to find out where Koga is. However, one of his team, a man named Hayami, turned out to have betrayed them by damaging the main computer system, so they could not track down Koga's whereabouts, who had been framed by Jiro. After being sedated, Koga is taken to a place where Jiro can monitor his entire movement through the CCTV cameras throughout the room. Jiro then gives him a test, where he is again given the choice of saving Konoha or the other girls who are his fans. Jiro then asked if he would prioritize finding his sister or saving the girls first. However, Jiro turns out to be scheming by implanting small monsters in some of the girls there, so he can control them to trap Koga. A terrible incident happened there and made the girls scream hysterically and then run in fear. At the same time, a giant robot appeared there and immediately attacked Koga. Jiro again gave him a choice, but he chose to face the robot this time and save the girls. Meanwhile, Konoha was not kidnapped by Jiro and was at Akemi's house. At the same time, Seiji did a live broadcast on all national television stations, where he then asked the players who had been scattered throughout the city to change their original forms. Hearing this, they became overjoyed and revealed their true form, then slaughtered the humans around them. Seiji reveals that the monsters result from experiments used by selfish and greedy humans, who want to maximize profits and exploit them for pleasure. Therefore, the players finally rebelled and took revenge on the human race who had used them all this time. Meanwhile, Koga, fighting against robots, seems overwhelmed because he can't use his hero equipment. Even so, he did not give up and put all his strength into defeating the robot. After he managed to overthrow the robot, a door leading to the elevator finally opened. The girls who thought the elevator was the only way out of that terrible place rushed towards it. But as it turned out, it was all just a trap, and the girls were eventually killed. Seeing this, Koga became frustrated and, at the same time, felt angry at Jiro because he had toyed with other people's lives as if they had no value. The only girl still alive, who had been controlled by Jiro all along, approached him and brought him to where Jiro was. In the middle of the city, Jin, who has turned into Zet, fights against the players and defeats them individually. Knowing this, Seiji then told everyone that the monsters and Zet were the result of experiments created by the Amagi Corporation, and suggested that they blame the Amagi family for their relatives killed by the players. After defeating the players there, Jin returned to his human form in front of many people. They also looked so angry and thought he was one of the players. But then, Sayama arrived there and immediately secured Jin so as not to become the target of the citizens' rampage. Turning back to Koga, he finally met Jiro, who introduced his son, Ichiro, to him. Ichiro turns out to be the one who controls the small insect monster, which has been doing the wiretapping all this time. Jiro again questions the justice that Koga upholds, which he thinks is complete nonsense. He then reveals that his son, Ichiro, is the player. Jiro reveals to Koga that he was a scientist who worked at the Amagi Corporation under the orders of Koga's father, Seizo. After the players' rebellion incident, Jiro intended to reveal what the Amagi Corporation was doing to the public. Still, Seizo forbade it and locked Jiro in the secret facility where the players were created. Not only confining him, but Seizo also locked his son, who was sickly with him, until not long after, Ichiro finally died. Jiro, who is not willing if his son just dies, makes Ichiro the player so that the child can stay alive until now. Until in the end, Seiji comes to free those trapped there. Because of that, Jiro wants to take revenge on Seizo and his family for the suffering he has experienced so far. At the same time, Seizo held a press conference and refuted Seiji's words about the Amagi Corporation having created these monsters. However, Seizo's right-hand man, who accompanied him in the press conference, suddenly got up and said that all of his words were true, and to prove it, he would end his own life. The man turned out to have been controlled by Ichiro's insect monster to create chaos. Seeing this on television, an angry Koga then said what Jiro's real purpose was for doing all this. Hayami then appears and reveals that he is Jiro's accomplice and is determined to help him take revenge on the Amagi family. Koga grabbed his gun and killed Hayami, Jiro, and Ichiro. After finally getting out of there, he met his team, who managed to find his whereabouts, put on the Alpha's hero costume, and rushed to where his father was. Seiji and his henchmen arrive at the press conference location to kill Seizo. At the same time, Jin, who had transformed into Zet, also arrived and fought against Seiji. However, he could easily defeat Jin and remove the ceramic spike he had previously implanted in Jin's body, instantly transforming him into a human form. Koga finally gets there and manages to kill Seiji's henchmen. When Koga was about to kill Seiji, his father told him to kill Jin. But Koga instead pointed his gun at his father, intending to kill him who had caused this mess. But Jin tries to dissuade Koga because killing Seizo won't change anything. Received a threat from his own son, Seizo then ordered his men to attack Koga. An irritated Koga finally shoots at his father, but his mother protects his father, even though they both end up getting hurt. Everyone there, including Jin, suddenly felt shocked by what Koga had just done. However, not long after, a terrible event occurred. Seiji turns out to have placed the players there, which then changes and attacks everyone. One of the players then blows up the building, killing many people. During panic and chaos, Jin finally finds a ceramic spike that can turn him into Zet. Before thrusting the ceramic spike into his chest, Jin ordered Koga to kill him if he became evil. He finally turned into Zet and reached the perfect level while maintaining his human side. However, after Jin reaches the perfect Zet level, the ring of exposures in his body then becomes active. It makes the players who are near him show their true identities, including Seiji and Tanaka. Seiji said that the players who changed because of the ring of exposures, not of their own will, would not return to their human form. Furthermore, he revealed that Tanaka was the player he had manipulated to get close to Jin. However, he did not expect Jin and Tanaka to fall in love and aspire to build a happy family like humans. As a player, Tanaka turns out to have a terrible power that can turn anyone into the sand with just a touch. Because of that, Koga kills her, not caring if she was the girl Jin loved. Seeing her being killed in front of him, Jin immediately felt furious, and Seiji thought that his goal of making him a perfect Zet and hating humans had been achieved. Seiji and Koga then fought until he managed to defeat Koga. Seiji then asked Jin to kill Koga because Koga wouldn't think twice about killing him. However, he killed Seiji, kept Koga alive, and left. 3 years later, Koga is now the leader of the Amagi Corporation, replacing his grandfather. He is still on a rescue mission as Alphas, protecting the residents from the players who are still hanging around killing humans. However, Koga chooses to hide his identity to live a quiet and peaceful domestic life with the girl he once saved years ago. Meanwhile, Jin isolated himself from those closest to him and still eradicated the players from behind the shadows to protect humanity. The anime ends.